start our live YouTube streams.
Get started.
Okay, I'll try to bring back up what I need to be seeing. Okay, maybe I've managed. Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our second event this semester online, visiting somewhere else, part of our series where we take advantage of our friends and ask them their generosity and ask them if they don't mind if we drop by and see actually where they are. And as you all know from tuning into other events, these things can take lots of different formats, which is always fun too, to work with the person and kind of understand how to make it work. Hold on just a second. I'm going to make sure everybody is muted. That is not me or Ciro. Thanks. Okay. I'm especially excited about this, not only because it's winter here, but because it's a kind of full circle. It feels like with this pandemic, and Ciro Miguel, who you see here in São Paulo, and actually was here like in the days before the pandemic in March of 2020, this very surreal moment now to look back on. So it feels really right that as we hopefully are now moving toward online events being totally by choice, that we conclude with a visit and also take advantage of Ciro being in Sao Paulo. He splits his time between Zurich and Sao Paulo, and I follow him on Instagram, and I saw these great, I mean, if you don't follow him on Instagram, you absolutely should, because it's just a very interesting eye, and amazing things to see. And so anyway, so I was like, you're in Sao Paulo, let's go. Let's go. I need to escape somewhere else. And so this work, talking with Ciro, he came up with this idea to visit the main thoroughfare in Sao Paulo, Paulista Avenue, and film a little bit. So I will show you. I have the video, so I'll play that, and maybe then we can have a little conversation. Just to introduce Ciro more formally, he's an architect, visual artist, and photographer, as I said, based in Zurich and Sao Paulo, and he's a doctoral fellow at the ETH Zurich, the GTA Institute. And a few years ago in 2019, with Charlotte Malter Barth and Vanessa Grossman, he curated the 12th International Biennale of Sao Paulo, which is titled Todo Dia, Every Day. He is a former partner at Angelo Bucci SPBR and has taught at ETH in the chair of Angelo Bucci, and also Mark Angelo, friend of the school, has been here before a few times, I think. So with that, I'll maybe give Ciro a chance to say hello while I pull up I don't know, Ciro, do you want to talk? Are you going to talk during, or we'll just watch, have a little screening, and then we can talk?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation and the lovely words. It's always nice to be with you guys, and good to be back here in Chicago. I prepared a mini text as a presentation because I don't talk on the video. So maybe if I situate by just very fast reading that, but it's up to you. I can also
perfect.
Just play. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I'll read it fast. It's just a brief introduction. So here we go. In a metropolis of 21.6 million people and 49,000 streets, the 1.7-mile-long Paulista Avenue stands out as a geographical, cultural, and political landmark. Located in the city's highest point, it is a microcosm of Brazil, the main stage for conflicts and celebrations, from political rallies to concerts and football championship triumphs. Paulista Avenue is São Paulo's main postcard image, with its skyscrapers, antennas, and fast cars representing the modernity of urban Brazil. Generally shot from above, these photographs are always present, reproduced in kiosks, stores, and bus stops along its length. The insistence on this point of view even seemed to have informed a few architectural projects that provide popular elevated viewpoints to the avenue. While this perspective highlights the contrast between the avenue's straight line and fragmented urban fabric, the aerial image misses out the action on the ground. As the city's main public space, Paulista Avenue is a melting pot that gathers everyday workers, merchants, shoppers, artists, protesters, tourists, teenagers, seniors, gay and straight, right and left, the richest and the poorest. Close to car traffic on Sundays since 2015, the avenue's vibrant energy is intensified by thousands of pedestrians, becoming a sort of an urban beach with different events at every block. While this change in policy was, at first, heavily criticized by car owners, its immediate success proved how such attitude was urgent to mitigate the city's lack of public spaces. The buildings flanking the avenue, residential apartment, offices, cultural centers, and etc., adopt different design strategies that amplify architecture's porosity to everyday life. Through a specific architectural vocabulary of long spans, cantilevers, elevated blocks, gardens, large roofs, and oversized stairs, these buildings defy the divided nature of the city and its social hierarchies. Instead of fences, walls, and barriers, these projects provide open, continuous, and unprogrammed public spaces, proposing a new interplay between inside and outside, between building and ground floor. So this video is an attempt to get a glimpse of Paulista Avenue's vibrant atmosphere and the role of some of its buildings. And then the video, just to give you a sense, it starts from my house. I live in Paulista Avenue. So it starts from my house and its gardens, and then we go through a little walk through the avenue, and then I show 6 buildings along its way. So that's it.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna share the video and try to do my best to set the settings to make it work well. But if I disappear or something, then let me know in the chat if there's something really wrong, okay? Thank everybody, we're very casual. All right, here we go. Let me just make sure that I get it. Okay, can everyone see the video? Yes, thumbs up.
Vamos lá, mais um então.
Artista talentoso, que te parou para ver o trabalho dele, que merece ser. Quem tá filmando, não filma.
Pode filmar aí à vontade.
Médica burra.
Metade de mim e já não sei mais onde é o meu começo e o meu fim. Você tá fazendo tudo errado.
Aí acabei de falar assim, ah, mas não tem problema.
Does it?
wipes off.
Yeah, but also it's like this to film thing up too.
Relógio que fica em seu topo. Construído em 1962, ele pode ser visto a mais de 5 quilômetros de distância.
Alô, vem cá! Alô!
Daqui a pouco ela tá encostando. É só louco sem coração. E quando ela me liga eu dou atenção. Eu mando uma localização. Vai! Hoje vai ter festa no colchão. Vai começar? E ela roda a cidade inteira pra ficar comigo. Porque eu sou o seu esquema preferido. Porque eu sou o seu esquema preferido. Ela dispensa baladas, amigas.
Olha lá.
É o seguinte, a gente pegou o som do John Lennon, fazia tempo que tinha tocar. E a gente é uma banda que toca já há 8 anos na rua. Eu queria ter a ajuda de vocês, então a gente gostaria de ter encarecidamente para mim.
All right, thank you so much. This is fantastic. I like the little, I mean, for us in America, it's familiar to hear that kind of song, also thinking of New Orleans and Carnival and Mardi Gras there, so it's perfect. Perfect ending for us. All right, so questions, thoughts from everybody. I mean, I know that there are some studios here right now for whom, you know, this is super relevant. I think it's relevant for everybody, but the combination of kind of so many architectural ideas and also life, so nice. All right, questions, comments.
If nobody speaks, maybe I can say something. Hi, Ciro. Thank you so much. This was great to see such a colorful and totally somehow exotic environment from this side of the world. I think it's a great lecture in terms of understanding the street and the, let's say, the also the building as not as something that is disconnected from the context, but something that actually is entirely derived from the context, which is really a very big lecture of architecture, especially today, and especially in the US, where instead there is a tendency of considering the building always as a severed item or object or entity landing over a context, and sometimes even somehow trying to be as much as autonomous as possible in order to reivindicate a certain kind of a distance or in a novelty or if you want even, I don't know, exception from the context. Whereas I really love the fact that what you're describing, what you're trying to look at and research is precisely how the street and the city penetrates into the building, no matter, and basically the capacity of the building and the form of the building is precisely in this articulation. The novelty and the innovation of the building stands in the capacity of rendering and transforming this experience into something totally new and totally, let's say, totally, totally different, totally articulated. To me, to see a telephone, a public telephone into the building is an achievement, right? You know, the fact that that building, when it's over, I mean, when it's closed in the night, people can still be there into a bench and smoke a cigarette or dance there, or or just play with the kids. I think it's a fantastic achievement. So I'm simply, yeah, I wondered if you could, on one side, talk more about how you are researching this. I mean, I know that you are doing this research through sections, which is also another very big architectural topic, usually not considered, or very, not very well considered recently. And then the other thing is, I'm impressed to see video. I think it's the best tool to see that. But I also, I mean, knowing that you're a fantastic and avid photographer, I was wondering also how photography somehow is able to render the contact of the building to the street, especially if you don't use a wide lens. Basically, the street and the building, you almost don't see. Well, I mean, with the camera, it's very easy to lift the camera and see the rest of the building. But when you said look through the camera with the film camera, you only look at the attachment of the building to the street. And so I wonder if you're doing also photographic research on that, like how the building really touched the ground at a photographic level.
Hi, Francesco. Nice to see you again. I think I'm very happy with your remarks and your question, because I think that you understood really well what I wanted to show, and I think that your description of how every building somehow amplify the context. I mean, it makes it even more, especially the case of mask. I mean, you can see both strategies in a way to amplify the environment, but also to reduce the environment. In a way that the one on top, even though there's this idea of multiplying to bring the street to the top, is also a way to protect also that environment from this kind of very vibrant context, also the going up and down, and so things like that. So I think that it's interesting how architecture is deployed in very simple, sometimes very bold in a way, in a long cantilever, but sometimes also in a very simple way, as you mentioned, a bench, or just you know, a little step down, or just a stair in the case of the first building that I showed, or the garden. So in a way, I think that that's very interesting, and I think that in São Paulo mostly, and also in this avenue specifically, the context is really part of the building, and you cannot really you cannot even think of this idea of an autonomous object. Of course, that what I show is just a few buildings that actually integrate with the street. I could also do another series with the office blocks that are somehow this idea of the autonomous object. I think it also exists. I chose to choose this one to kind of understand this different, how this everyday and the energy of the street, of the avenue, can dialogue. And then you mentioned photography and video. Of course, as an architect and an architect that takes pictures, I always was very interested into exactly in those spaces where the building meets the ground floor, and in these uses of from the simple to the most to big gatherings, to very intimate encounters, or very simple things. So I think I always try to show these things, this everyday life, let's say, which is something that architectural photography insists not to show. Even if you look at books on Brazilian architecture nowadays, you would see these buildings mostly empty, or old pictures or things like that, without, as if these things taint the building, which I try to see with photography and now with video, that actually is quite the opposite. I mean, they portray a much more complex way that these buildings work. I mean, and I think it's interesting because, as you see in MASP, the building almost breathes as an animal. Sometimes like a person. Sometimes it's full of people. Sometimes it's half empty. Sometimes it's more or less. So it also changes over time. It's not that it's always this, you know. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask about the photography, because there is a tendency in architectural photography to not have people or users inside, whereas here in São Paulo, it's almost impossible to photograph them without, you know, without, you know, let's say the way that they have been used, or the way they're, you know, constantly being inhabited in multiple forms. And actually, it's what truly provides a richness. And so, you know, like, that's why I was asking about the photography and the way you still, you know, you impress these on still life. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this also relates a bit to my PhD research, which is about this kind of, I mean, in a way, representation of modernism in the case of Brasilia. But I think that this is it's quite interesting. But I mean, architects don't like so much. It seems that architects don't like so much. I mean, even though they talk a lot about how the building should be used, but it seems that when you see the photographs, they tend to be very empty still. But I think in this case, we try to, I mean, at least I try to revisit these buildings and others and show different angles and show different uses. And yeah.
Hi, Ciro.
Hi, Barbara. Hi.
So great to see you again. We're all hoping to see you in person sooner or later.
Yes.
Just to follow up to what Francesco was saying, what you replied, what you answered, I think it was a fantastic sampling of possibilities on how the street could expand inside a building. And I think what is fascinating is that although the elements, or at least like the architectural elements that are used, are basically always similar. So it's either a stair, a ramp, or a step, an escalator. The architectural language is always different, and it's impressive to see them or to consider that they are all somehow along the same stretch. So kind of like trying to build up an immense vocabulary of solution on how to integrate a public domain within a private building, which I think is something that is fantastic. I think it would be amazing to really see also the other condition that you were mentioning. So what happens when an office building tries to segregate from the street condition? Because I guess at least like comparing to what is happening maybe in an American city or like in a city like Chicago, where basically a building is most of the time an extrusion of the plot. What happens in that condition? Are they still trying to have or to consider the atrium or the lobby space as an extension of the street? Or is it because it's really contextual to the Avenida Paulista? Or also, I'm curious to know if this type of condition you think might exist also in other parts of the city, perhaps not along a monumental axe, such as the Avenida Paulista.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Barbara. It was great to see you again. Sure. I think that Paulista, because of this, because of its iconic status and also this fact that it is also open on the weekends, on Sundays for public, I think this has also changed a little bit of the character of the avenue in the last years. I mean, so somehow you see more commerce popping out. You see like tiny galleries sometimes around the building. So you start to see these mini strategies to kind of get people in or to try to create something. Of course, that you have, as I mentioned, sometimes this other condition of buildings there, but there's one that I love that I should have shown in front of Conjunto Nacional, this very big one, almost the last white one. There's a bank in front of it that it's a solid piece of architecture that just comes very direct on the floor. There's absolutely no threshold, no pilotis, nothing. It's just a volume. And then there's just 3 steps in front of it. And these 3 steps became a meeting point of teenagers, became a meeting point. So people gather in this space, even though the bank hates it and wants to keep people away. But somehow, because it's a corner close to the subway, it became a meeting spot. So somehow I also like the way that sometimes it subverts. When the building says, don't come here, people still come, and sometimes you have the opposite, buildings that says come here and people don't come, so you have also empty galleries. So of course that we would need a second part 2 of these things. And there are also other business avenues in São Paulo that are completely the opposite of Paulista, that is just office building, mono, programmatic, just enter with cars and much more harsh in a way. So I think that Paulista over the years start to become this kind of very important public space in the city. So it definitely is a special case.
Thank you. I wonder, is there any new building under construction
in Paulista?
Yeah.
No,
I was wondering whether they are still keeping this attitude on trying to, integrate some level of publicness within their section.
Yeah, I think that the newest one, I showed one of the last ones, which was this museum that is from 2000. It's actually a building of a competition that I personally lost, so it's a very sad one. But there's also, there was a shopping mall that opened, and somehow even this shopping mall opened a little garden next to it that is also a huge success, this little garden. When you see the people doing the massages, it's actually in the garden of this shopping mall that opened a public garden next to it. So definitely, I think that I will do the part 2 now after this talk.
Looking forward to watch it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I mean, I have so many, but can I just ask you, have you ever done a catalog? Like, one of the beautiful things also is evident in your video is the shift of material from the street. Sometimes the space, I mean, the material of the street really penetrate into the building. I mean, one of my favorite building is Artigas, School of Architecture, where you have, this amazing, step that separates the outside from the inside, but there's not really a separation from the outside and the inside has many of the building that you've shown. But yeah, to me, the most relevant thing is really the shift of material. Like you don't have, like in a Mies building where you have a plinth and then there is a travertine beginning, or, really lifting the building above the city, or, like projecting a shadow over the ground of the city. Here we really walk in and you barely see the differences, and the material suddenly becomes extremely important to progressively move you forward from the asphalt of the avenida to the internal material. So I'm wondering if you're also doing a sort of database or studies about those thresholds and shifts, right? That might be either abrupt or very slow, like in so you have at some point you have an handrail which is entirely designed, or you have a piece of stone over asphalt or mosaic like you shown, or a garden like Burle Marx. I don't know, like I'm wondering of how you're measuring and controlling and cataloging those thresholds, if there is a project about that.
Yeah, that's very well pointed. I'm glad that you looked at it, that you noticed. Actually, yes. I mean, there's a certain type of materials that are used somehow that in public spaces that there's an example of I think of Atelier Bauau, that they mentioned that someone, if you sit in a concrete wall, is not the same if you sit in a glass, that you behave different in different ways. And I think that this sort of materials also definitely represent the extension of the street. Also, I mean, they are very easily maintained materials that can actually survive the amount of people and these uses. It's interesting because, I mean, in the case of some of the cases that I show, they use Portuguese stone. If you notice, these stones that you see a lot in Lisbon, and also it's very common here in Brazil in public spaces and plazas and everything. And Avenida Paulista used to be in Portuguese stone for a long time. So the buildings that you see with Portuguese stones are actually referring to a previous material that were used in the sidewalks. So a few years ago they changed to concrete, but the Portuguese stones remain inside. So Conjunto Nacional is like that. Even the last one that I show in the last floor, they reproduced the Portuguese stones that still existed at that time while they were doing the project in Paulista. Not anymore, but you see that these materials also change. Also, the materials that are used also in the subway that are also kind of very interesting, and Artigas, for instance, and other modern architects were also using these materials in their houses, to cases of houses that have asphalt inside, like to kind of really the absurd condition, let's say. But I think that I think that this is a very sensitive remark on your part, to understand that these actual materials really are important for to how these buildings perform, let's say. So the materials are definitely important, for sure. But I'm not doing a catalog, but and I think, as far as I know, I don't know anyone that is doing that, but definitely is a very interesting research idea.
Any other questions or thoughts besides just nice ideas for new projects, part 2 of the video or catalog of materials?
Is it was it too exotic in your or not, or what do you?
I think, I don't know. I would be curious to see the same approach to Michigan Avenue or something, also because I imagine also that you would find these things that through the lens become strange or different or immediate in a way that because you don't expect, but maybe that's not the right street. I don't know. I don't think. And it's also that, like, I'm thinking now because we have it on YouTube, and I'm sure I'll get a warning from YouTube because the music that you hear, the robots will recognize and not, let us. Not that we make money off of posting these videos, but yeah. So there is like a kind of familiarity. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, I sort of have a question off of that, I suppose. Ciro, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I know you've spent some time in the United States, in New York, and are in Switzerland sometimes, or maybe how would you see this project? Maybe would it be possible in America or in Europe, or like what does it say about the Brazilianness or the culture that Brazil has in the relationship to the city that's different than maybe the American relationship or the European relationship as you see it?
Yeah, yes, this is a very good question. I tend to think that this, of course, it's let's say it's almost a Brazilian invention. This really open relationship with the ground. Taken to a different level. Started with Niemeyer, already changing Corbusier's plans, and continue this research over time. Of course, that it relates also with the weather. Here we have this privilege of having a very fair condition, even though it rains a lot, and we also have different things. But I always like to imagine projects that were done by Brazilian architects abroad, when they were, for instance, Niemeyer in France, or Paulo Mendes da Rocha also in France, when he did the Pompidou competition. That was the only project that actually suggested the continuation of the plaza through the other side of the street. So somehow it was the only one in the whole competition that had this idea that somehow in a Brazilian context would be kind of a natural thing to do, to connect streets and kind of put the building, putting all these things together. And I feel that other architects, for instance, also Niemeyer in Paris, when he did the building for the headquarters of the Communist Party, he is the only one that actually thinks that the corner of that street in a completely different way. He kind of recedes the building, creates a public plaza, and somehow, of course, there are fences now, but his original idea was also to offer these general spaces. In a way, I think that even with the weather conditions, you could think that there are possibilities. Of course, it's kind of a design question, but I think it's possible. In the case of Switzerland, I also, in many European, also in the United States, you see a lot of this entrance of the building through a door, which I think sometimes it's very strange that you have this building and then it's actually a revolving door, and that's the entrance of that thing. Even the Pompidou is a bit like that. So that you have this whole thing and then you arrive at the mini door. So I I think definitely is a different approach to design. And when I see Brazilians acting in different contexts, they also tend to use this vocabulary that was developed here.
I have two questions, Ciro. The first is, what is the role of vegetation in this strip? I mean, it was very striking to see what almost looked like the jungle immediately adjacent to Lino Babadi's museum, where it is a mass. I mean, it's like a building. It's dense, it's thick, it's volumetric, it's opaque. So I was just wondering how that plays into the context. And then the second is a really trivial question, but an important one for me. Who designed the phone booths in the plastic? Or was that Unimark, or the Unimark designers, or someone else?
Well, it's actually, yeah, it's a well-known design. This phone booth. I forgot the name now, but I can research later and send you. But it's a well-known thing, and actually I filmed those ones because they're almost the last ones in the city, and I think it's fantastic, as Francesco mentioned, that you still have public phones inside the building, which I think it's super generous that they kept that thing there while they disappeared from the whole city. And many people were using these booths from other things. They were doing chairs with it because it's a very beautiful design. They're called here Big Ear in Portuguese. But I will research. I think it's, I'll look at it. So then you mentioned the role of vegetation. I think that the vegetation is it's very interesting because, I mean, the first building, actually my building, that there's that park underneath is by Burle Marx, and also in that space it's a very precious part of the whole Paulista, even though it's not public, but somehow it's also infrastructural because it's actually there's a parking garage underneath, so it connects the whole building, and that thing also works as almost as a buffer from the avenue. So as soon as you enter, as you see in the video, you barely listen to the cars and with birds and everything else. And during the pandemic, it was also very precious to have that space. The park next to MASP, I think it's also a very beautiful place. I had a video more inside it. I cut it because of time, but it's actually, it's really a jungle, a piece of jungle. It's a reminder of what São Paulo was. I mean, São Paulo was the Atlantic forest, basically, you know, so it's really a city in the forest. And every tree that you see reminds you of that because of their scale, as you mentioned. I mean, the variety and birds and animals that are still somehow survive and are still there. And I think that this connection between the architecture and the park was also Lina Bobardi herself suggested once to connect both, that she was calling it the central park of the poor. But her idea was to continue the forest under the building and cover the avenue. So the avenue would be underground in that part, and you would have a big forest in the middle of the street. So it's a very small sketch, a bit absurd, but I also think it's a beautiful idea. And that space is also heavily used. So in a way, like it offers a different atmosphere. It's much more dense, and it's dark inside, much more. Also, it's not as cold and hot because you're among the trees. So it's definitely, it complements for sure the rest. It's also a breathing point of the avenue. And I must say that it's it's one of it's a rare place. Let's say it doesn't happen all the time. So I think it's special. You saw it also in the postcard. You see how dense it is.
I asked because I just think of like a city like LA where it's in the desert, but there's a constant infrastructure of maintaining greenery and gardens in an impossible situation where it's hard to grow, So there's this infrastructure of labor and water that keeps everything green and pristine. And yet in Sao Paulo, it seems that the climatic conditions are there for the jungle to reappear at any moment. And so I'm wondering, is it something that's kept at bay or ignored or repressed? I mean, it appears in The Garden by Burle Marx and then in the ideas of Bobardi. But their design idea, I'm just wondering, is there a wildness there or untamed aspect when the conditions are there for that? That's all.
I think so. I always think about that a crack in a building in Switzerland will always remain a crack. A crack here, in 1 week, there's a little tree coming out or a little vegetation. I mean, it's a very alive place, full of insects, full of birds and everything else. And vegetation is also very strong. So for instance, the maintenance, when you have a garden, for instance, in a slab, in the case of the building here, the roots come down like completely crazy, so that there's problems with leaks. And so you also need this, you have to keep it at bay, as you mentioned, because it's really wild. And if you don't maintain that, it takes out. In my building here, there's a situation that I also like. There's a cactus that actually touched the slab. I mean, it grew so much that became almost an expected column, also palm trees that also became a bit competing with the pilotis. And they are in the shade, in a situation that you don't imagine that a plant will grow, but they still grow. Also in the city, there's a lot of trees that compete with electric wires all the time. So when there's rain, they fall. So there's a heavy maintenance as well of these trees to cut them and to treat them and somehow to avoid that they take over. But there are many conflicts. I mean, even last week in my building here, one of the inhabitants was asking to cut the banana tree of the garden because it was covering the view, and there was also a nest of wasps in the tree that was going inside. So there's a lot of mini conflicts that arrive that happens with these things. But there is a bit of let's say protection against it sometimes. Some projects accept more the gardens and nature. Some keep it under control.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
I was hoping someone would ask about the telephone. As soon as I came up, I had the same.
I also had the lucky that if someone was using it, which I think was also very surreal.
Yeah, I mean, you find I'm thinking of a few places where I used to use the phone before I had a phone, and you still have the niches in the wall or some kind of space, but then the machine is gone and you lose the meaning. Anyway, I thank you so much. This was extremely pleasant and very, very nice to visit you and think through these questions together. Any other last question or thought for Ciro before we let him go enjoy a carnival?
Maybe a banal, just out of curiosity, it's a very maybe silly question. what pushed you, or what was the urgency you felt of like filming these instead of like just taking photographs and redrawing? I mean, you kind of answered already to this question.
Yeah, it was actually, I mean, when Jane sent me the assignment, which it was very, let's say, challenging, because it was actually the first time that actually, I mean, I filmed other things before, but somehow it was really, I really enjoyed the process of filming the scenes and coming back many times. I told Jane I went many times. I didn't go once or twice. Actually, it was 4 weeks filming pieces here and there, and then trying to construct the story. And once it was finished, there was a lot of lacking things. So then I went back and refilmed, and I had also a problem of putting my finger in the cell phone, but which was unexpected. My finger was everywhere. I cut it. But I think that the filming has something that I also didn't expect, was the sound. I don't know if you noticed, but when there are cars, the sound is extremely loud, and as soon as there's none, there's this kind of peace. And sometimes you have the singers in the background, but this is something that in video I was not counting on it. Of course, that the way I shot the videos were also very related with the way I take photographs. I mean, mostly standing the camera and let the action go through. I tried to walk a little bit. I don't know if it was that successful. Very hard to do with your hand. It's a bit annoying to watch as well. But I thought it was a bit of an experiment to actually try to show how you approach a building from different perspectives, from the street, from behind, and things like that. So, so somehow I definitely, and I think that the video has a more perhaps direct way of communicating more than photography, I guess. But difficult to do also, not so good at.
No, I think it was wonderful because you really unveiled some moments that I wasn't even aware of, except for some of the buildings, and by looking only at drawings, I never realized some
yeah, for sure. I think that these buildings, they are really, I mean, first, also, I'm in love with them. This is something I didn't say, but I really like these places. Some of them are not as good as it was from a few years ago. I mean, some of them also lost their part of their capacity. I mean, Fiesp, one of the ones with Paulo Mendes da Rocha, it's a building that they cut many things. I mean, it was a much more complex and much more beautiful project that somehow over time was losing, they were putting gates and closing by. Still, you have traces of what it was, but so somehow, but still, I still show it in a way because I think it still has its, one day it will return to what it was. But I think that this idea of filming many days, and yeah, I think it makes a difference to get these moments. I think that if you do it in 3 days, you will not see half of what you saw. For instance, I tried to do it in a week, and it didn't work out. When actually I told Jane it was raining, so I mean, different condition. You see a bit of rain sometimes, but it's not the same.
Well, thank you for accepting the challenge and taking, the generosity of experimenting this way is really, I think super meaningful for us. And you'll have to come back to Chicago soon.
Yes.
Sooner than a 2-year period.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much, and have fun. Have a good evening.
Well, thank you very much again. And of course, if anyone has questions or anything, just send me a message. Jane has my contacts. And yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I loved it. It was really, really nice.
My pleasure. No.
Yes, it was beautiful. And thank you for the questions too.
Thank you, Ciro.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night,
See you
everybody.
soon. Bye-bye.